He is the first openly gay man and the first Asian American Democrat in the Georgia legislature. Please welcome Representative Sam Park. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, John. Happy to be here.
So let's just get to it. What are you seeing on the ground right now in these runoffs?
Yeah, so I think context is always important, but I think all of the elements, all the pieces that allowed Georgia to turn blue during the November elections are very much in place. And I think especially within a lot of these communities who turned out for the very first time, there's a lot of momentum in that they saw how important their vote is. And they've really, I think for the first time, understood the influence they potentially had in terms of all of these elections. And so, based on conversations, based on what I've seen on the ground, there's an incredible amount of enthusiasm amongst voters of color and young voters. But of course, there are challenges as well, particularly in that a lot of these first-time voters haven't voted in a runoff election. So of course, part of the job that we're all doing is encouraging them not to only utilize the power that they have once more, but to provide timely and accurate information about how they can ensure their vote counts. That's on the Democratic side. Of course, on the Republican side, it's quite honestly been fascinating because we're currently in the midst of a GOP civil war in which Secretary Raffensperger, Brian Kemp, not only certified the results of the election after 3 recounts, they followed the law and demonstrated integrity, at least as to that component. Yeah. But of course, we continue to have Senator Loeffler and David Perdue stand in support of these lies that is really doing irreparable damage. And quite frankly, furthering the objectives of our foreign adversaries and undermining the integrity of our elections and trust in American democracy. And I hope voters, when they are coming out to vote right now, and of course, by January 1st, understand what's at stake and really understand what Senator Loeffler and Perdue are doing and the action and the implications of their actions.
What are some lessons? So we just went through the general election. What did we learn in where people turned out? Obviously it ended up being close. We've heard about Georgia changing for a long time. It's finally happening. We're in the middle of it. Where did we do better than we expected? Where do we have challenges? Like what are the lessons from the general that we're applying right now to help Jon Ossoff, to help Raphael Warnock?
So, back in 2018, Stacey Abrams deployed the correct strategy, in my opinion, of harnessing the opportunities that exist in Georgia, which is empowering communities of color. The state of Georgia demographically is becoming, of course, more diverse. But there's also, but that diversity, of course, in part is being driven by people who are moving into the state. But also, I think it's simply generational change, right? I'm born and raised in Georgia. And when I let folks know that, I'm an openly gay Asian American Georgia state representative, they're shocked because they're, the understanding of Georgia based on our representation, and rightfully so, is that, it's a bunch of, old white conservative folks, right? That's not the future of the state. And quite frankly, that's not the present reality of our state's population. And so I think the approach that Stacey took in 2018, which was the first in Georgia of building a multiracial, multi-generational coalition by first and foremost empowering these voters, empowering Georgians by getting them registered to vote, and then encouraging them, inspiring them to utilize the power that they have, is the correct approach. And we saw the impact of that, I think, most clearly here in Gwinnett. And maybe I may be a little bit biased just because I'm the chairman of the Gwinnett delegation, and my district is located centrally, right here in the heart of Gwinnett, the county seat, the city of Lawrenceville. But I don't think it's mere coincidence that Carolyn Bordeaux from the Georgia 7th Congressional District was the only seat in the entire country that flipped from red to blue. And her success was driven by, again, young communities of color voting in unprecedented numbers. And quite frankly, I think the path forward is just that. It's harnessing the next generation and maintaining and continuing to build upon the multi-generational, multiracial coalition that exists in Georgia.
So, it's interesting even just hearing you say that. I think because the stakes of these elections have been so extraordinarily high, just the desperation to win has made so much of our conversation around just, are we electing Democrats? Are we electing Republicans? You're the first openly gay man to be elected in Georgia to the legislature. Uh, how much of that election, I guess I obviously know it's going to be a mix, but how much do you attribute that to a changing electorate, and how much do you attribute that to actually reaching voters who are changing in real time on this issue? You said yourself there's the stereotype of a older white conservative voter. Um, How much of your campaign do you feel like you went to people and showed them that voting for a gay person was no big deal?
So what my election taught me was that character matters. And I think a new electorate, what they ultimately want, they want effective, competent leaders that are able to get the job done and to, when all is said and done, serve them, right? My conversations with most Georgians and having grown up and lived in Georgia my entire life, folks aren't, you know, ideologues, right? They're not extremists on either side, particularly when it comes to first-time voters who tend to be apolitical. Oftentimes, they just simply want effective government. And I think in light of the abysmal failures of the Trump administration, where it's not necessarily partisan, but it's what has the American government done in the face of the worst public health crisis in this country's history? What has the Republican Party done when it comes to addressing the growing economic inequities, the social unrest that continues to bubble up because it's never been properly addressed, going back to the very beginning of our country. And so I think what's really driving a lot of folks in terms of first-time voters, as well as moderates and your independents who typically tend to turn out, is the desire simply to have effective government. And I think that bodes well because, at least for right now, I think it bodes well for Democrats, I should say, because the Democratic Party is the only party right now that actually acknowledges the problems in which we face. We're not, unfortunately, led by Trump. The Republican Party seems to have become detached from reality, which I think is such a dangerous thing in this moment in which we are facing imminent threats and dangers. The fact that we are living through a mass casualty event where already 300,000 Americans have lost their lives, and we're just about to enter into the worst part of this pandemic, right?
Yeah.
It's terrifying and concerning. But at the same time, I think it's also important to understand the root cause and address what's driving traditionally conservative voters further to the right, whether it is the loss of identity, whether it is economic uncertainty. In order for us to ultimately persevere and overcome the current challenges that we're facing, I think we have to come together. We have to find common ground, which I know Biden is doing everything that he can to foster. And that's the same is very much true when it comes to local and state politics as well.
What are some ways people, like, I think there's been this concern about people from out of state coming in. There's been questions about the efficacy of money. What do you think people listening right now outside of Georgia can do to help win these runoffs right now?
Volunteer and donate. And there are many, first and foremost, Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff's campaigns. Go directly to their websites, sign up to volunteer on both of their campaigns, contribute to both of their campaigns, and then support all of the additional infrastructure that's built around. There is a coordinated campaign going through the Democratic Party of Georgia. Again, donate and volunteer through the Democratic Party of Georgia, and then support the local grassroots community groups who are really on the front lines of this transformative work. Oftentimes I've read so many articles saying, yeah, after the 2018 gubernatorial election, Stacey really began her efforts on changing the electorate. No, Stacey's been engaged in this work for the past decade, right? She's invested all of her time and energy, again, in empowering people through organizations like the New Georgia Project that's registered hundreds of thousands of folks in this state, in conjunction with other community-based organizations like Asian Americans Advancing Justice and the Asian American Advocacy Fund, along with many other PACs who are, again, members of the community who are working to organize their own communities, empower their own communities, and ultimately turn them out for our shared objectives of making progress and getting through these incredibly challenging times.
Last question. What's the gayest show you're streaming right now?
The gayest show I'm streaming.
It doesn't need to have, it just has to, I would count The Crown. I think it evokes certain homosexual qualities. What is the show that's like that is what, how does Netflix know you're gay? That's the question, really. Netflix knows I'm gay. It knows. The algorithm knows. How do your streaming algorithms know that you're a gay person? Maybe maybe they even know you're the first gay person elected to the Georgia legislature. Gay man elected.
So Pose, of course, is fabulous.
Oh, that'll count. Yeah, that'll count. That'll get you there.
But of course, I flew through that, a while back ago. Legendary on HBO Max is fabulous as well. And then I just saw a preview of season 13 of RuPaul's Drag Race, and of course.
Wow. All right. Sam Park, thank you so much. It was good to talk to you. And let's go win these runoffs. And if you go to votesaveamerica.com, you can support a lot of the organizations and volunteer with the organizations that the Representative Sam Park talked about. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.